The purpose of this presentation is just to go over some general religious statistics in the US and the world to put this module into context. In this chart, you can see that roughly 70% of the US population identifies as Christian. In the chart, they are indicated by the large yellow bar. Of the other bars, the tiniest are all the other religions, the largest of which is Judaism, which comes in at 1.9%. The larger bars apart from Christianity are atheists, agnostics, and unaffiliated but non-religious, those who say that religion is unimportant to them. These are all the various shades of green. The cyan bar are unaffiliated people who say that religion or spirituality is in some way important to them. It is important to note that whether somebody calls herself or himself an atheist or agnostic or non-religious often depends upon how the question is phrased and whether agnosticism is defined as believing there is no God or lack of belief in God, or in some way implies certainty about God's non-existence. On this page, I organized the data in another way. I put all of the non-religious groups together and all of the non-Christian religious groups together, including the unaffiliated who claim that some kind of religion or spirituality is important to them, together into the same bars. As you can see, there are more non-religious people in the US here than all the non-Christian religions combined. Nevertheless, it is noteworthy that atheism and non-belief are views that is seldom portrayed by protagonists on television or presented as anything apart from fringe in popular culture and the news media. Jewish people, Muslims, and even Buddhists and Hindus, and these last two represent significantly less than a single % of the population each, tend to be better represented and not treated as fringe or extreme when discussed. In spite of this, atheists are the most hated minority group in the US. If you look at the first chart here, it shows how many people said atheists do not fit their vision of an American society. On the right, you can see how many said they least approve of their child marrying an atheist. Note also that even in 2003, not long after the 9/11 attack, atheists are still more hated than Muslims, who took a lot of criticism at that time. Some respondents associated atheism with illegal behavior like drug use and prostitution, that is to say with immoral people who threaten respectable community from the lower end of the social hierarchy. Others saw atheists as rampant materialist and cultural elitists who threaten common values from above, the ostentatious wealthy who make a lifestyle out of consumption, or the cultural elite who think they know better than everyone else. Below is a link to an article on the topic. Here are numerous rather shocking quotes said by famous people and groups about atheists. I'm not going to read them all here, but you should pause and read them. Can you imagine anybody in power saying anything similar to this about Jewish people or about Buddhists? Bush, for example, said that atheists should not even be considered citizens of the US. Can you imagine the uproar if somebody said that about Jewish people or Muslims? There would be a terrible uproar. But when this was said about atheists, it was largely not objected to in the press. Here is something more recent. In 2016, an Oklahoma charity refused to take money from atheists who wished to donate to the Murrow Indian Children's Home, a home for orphan children. After the refusal, the atheists tried to raise even more money in the hopes that they would take a larger sum. The charity refused to take even the $28,000 the group managed to raise, money those children could have used. The atheists even tried to help the charity by paying the home's electric bills, but they were told that they could not pay bills for somebody without their permission. Eventually they gave up, and the children of the Murrow Indian Children's Home were refused the help. The home really did need this money, and the last story I could find was that they were so severely behind in their funds they might have to shut their doors. The donors, disheartened, gave their money to Camp Quest, a summer camp for atheist children. But the United States is a bit unusual among major industrialized nations with first world education and technology. If you look at the breakdown here, you will see many countries have far more non-believers. The reason for the two colors of green is the high and low estimates. The total green is the high estimate, and the dark green alone is the low. So you'll see that France, Germany, Japan, Denmark, Sweden likely have populations that are more than half non-believers. This also helps debunk the idea that atheists cannot be moral, given that many of these other countries with much higher percentages of atheists have much less crime, especially violent crime, than we do here in the US. In spite of the fact that atheists are so hated in the US and many people assume that they are immoral, the evidence doesn't seem to bear this out. Some people argue that the fact that atheists are underrepresented in prisons show that religion is not necessary for morality and that atheists seem to do better than religious citizens at maintaining moral behavior. Others claim that data is skewed by inmates who would prefer to say that they are religious, though the polls are anonymous. Some claim that atheists often go through higher levels of education, while prison populations are largely inhabited by the poor, which may skew the numbers in the atheist favor. The arguments may continue, but as far as prison data is concerned, there does not seem to be any indication that atheists are less moral than religious citizens, since there is a much smaller percentage of them in prison than their numbers in the general population. Often it is claimed that Hitler was an atheist. While there certainly have been a number of despotic leaders who have been atheists, as well as men and women of varying faiths, the claim that Hitler was an atheist is so often repeated by so many people it deserved debunking here. These are just two of the many possible quotes illustrating the fact. I'm not going to read these quotes here, but if you pause and read them, you will clearly see their religious nature. Hitler was not an atheist, nor was the typical member of the Nazi Party. So, what was the point of all this? It was simply to put in perspective the debate over whether or not religion is necessary for ethics before going on to the other presentations. Until next time.